Are you thinking about buying your first home in Peterborough, but you're not sure where to start? Well, in today's video, I'm going to break down the 5 things that you need to know before you make an offer so you don't make a costly mistake. To start, let's talk about the market. So currently it's February 2026, which means we're officially 4 years removed from the peak of the real estate market in February 2022. Now, most experts are predicting that prices should remain flat this year, or they could decline by about 1 to 3%. However, most properties across the Peterborough area have already declined by 10 to 20% from that peak in 2022. Right now, new listings are selling within about 30 days, but most of them are selling for under their list price and with conditions. Now, some bidding wars are still happening if the property is underpriced. And when they do happen, yes, it does sell for a little bit over that list price, but most of the time it's selling with conditions, even if it goes into multiple offers. The days of going in blind are behind us and negotiation is back. Buyers and sellers are going back and forth multiple times before reaching an agreement in most cases. So if you've been thinking about buying your first home, honestly, this is probably one of the best markets we've seen in the past 5 years. Next, let's talk about what a first house looks like in the Peterborough area. Most first-time buyers that I'm working with are getting pre-approved for anywhere between $400,000 and $600,000. And the good news is you can purchase a detached house in both the city and county of Peterborough for that price. Now, one thing to note is that if you are purchasing a property for under $500,000, you can probably expect to do some minor cosmetic changes to the property to bring it up to date. For example, doing a new kitchen or new floors or painting the property. Another thing to note is that if you are looking in rural Peterborough, some of the best areas for first-time buyers are Havelock, Norwood, Trent Hills, and Omemee. I would focus on those areas if you're looking for your first house. And honestly, Havelock is probably one of the most affordable areas within 35 minutes to the city of Peterborough. Next, let's talk about financing the property. Now, a common myth that I run into is that you need 20% down to purchase your first house, and that's simply not true. In Ontario, you can purchase a house with as little as 5% down if the purchase price is below $500,000. Now, when you purchase a property with less than 20% down in Ontario, you will need something called mortgage insurance. Essentially, this is an insurance that protects the lender, and it's required for all purchases with less than 20% down. This will result in a slightly higher mortgage amount, but typically the interest rate for an insured mortgage is slightly below the market rate for a non-insured mortgage. Now, in addition to that down payment, you also want to save about 1 to 3% of the purchase price for closing costs. This involves any inspection, lawyer fees, and land transfer tax. Now, there are a few benefits to being a first-time buyer in Ontario. One of them is the land transfer tax rebate. Essentially, this is $4,000 that comes right off of the top of your land transfer tax amount, and it can help reduce some of those closing costs. Another advantage is the first home savings account. Essentially, this is a bank account that combines the best parts of a TFSA with the best parts of an RRSP. So if you're thinking about purchasing your first home in the next 1 to 3 years and you've already maxed out your TFSA and you're hoping for another savings vehicle, the first home savings account is a fantastic opportunity, and you should speak to somebody at your bank to learn a little bit more. Next, let's talk about the process to purchase a home. So the first step is to go out and look at properties with your realtor. This is when you're going to go for showings, you're going to tour properties, and you're going to determine what you like and what you don't like. Next, once you've found a house, you're going to determine the market value of that house, and then you're going to proceed with an offer. Now, in Ontario, we make an offer with something called an agreement of purchase and sale. This is a standardized form created by the Ontario Real Estate Association, and it's how you place an offer on a property in Ontario. Now, there are several things in that agreement of purchase and sale that your realtor will go over with you, but there are 4 main considerations when you're placing an offer: the price, the closing date, the conditions, and the deposit. The price is the purchase price of that property. The conditions are the things that need to be done prior to that transaction going through, such as home inspection or obtaining financing on the property. The closing date is when you move into that property, and the deposit is essentially a amount of money that you submit once your offer is accepted. It counts towards the purchase price, and essentially it's good faith money. Finally, I wanted to talk about some tips to have your offer accepted if you're in a competitive market. So the first tip is the closing date. One of the advantages of being a first-time buyer is that you don't have a house to sell. So basically, you can offer a closing date that the seller prefers. This can give you a leg up on any buyer that has a house to sell or even has a sale of buyer's property condition. Basically, you're going to be a more favorable buyer to most sellers because you won't have that condition, and you'll be able to go with the closing date that they want. The second tip is to start negotiations a little bit below market value. Especially in this market, what we're seeing is prices going back and forth a couple of times, and essentially during a negotiation, one party wants to win. So when you start a little bit below market value, you can come up and then come up a little bit in price, maybe even get it still below that market value. But the seller is going to think that they increased your purchase price and they're going to feel like they won. So if you start a little bit below market value, you might be able to get that property at a great deal. And the third tip is to submit a pre-approval letter or a personal letter with your offer. The pre-approval letter will basically tell the seller that you can afford their property, and the personal letter adds some sort of personality to the piece of paper, and it lets the seller know a little bit more about you and a little bit more about what your goals are with the property. I've definitely seen this work in the past, especially if it's a multiple offer situation. Submitting a personal letter with maybe a photograph, if you're comfortable, has definitely tugged on the seller's heartstrings and got my buyer's offer accepted. Well, that's all for me. I hope you liked this video. And if you're thinking about purchasing your first home this year, I'd love the opportunity to chat with you. You can click the first link in the description to book a call with me. And as always, buying a home is a big decision. And one of the things that I always tell my clients is to make sure you're going to stay in that property for the next 3 to 5 years at least. This will basically allow you to ride out any ups and downs that we do see in the market. Again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did like this video, you might like the video I made on what I think is going to happen in the Peterborough real estate market in 2026. You can click here to check it out. Talk soon.